the creatures was almost instantly right there on them. Charles later told that this moment was the most shocking event of his life. In this episode, we will take a closer look into the incredible Pascagoula abduction, the event that would soon after reach global attention. The following experience happened on the evening of October 11th, in 1973. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker was abducted by unearthly creatures while on a fishing trip near Pascagoula, Mississippi. The day before the incident, a total of 15 different people, including two policemen, reported seeing a large silver-looking UFO slowly flying over New Orleans, Louisiana. Charles was 42 and Calvin only 19 years old at the time. When they arrived at their destination, they noticed a sign right next to the fishing lake. Calvin was hesitant and thought that maybe they should find another lake to fish in, but Charles insisted that it was fine, so they proceeded. They stayed for a while until the night started to creep in. About 7 p.m. The fish would not bite, so they were planning to soon go home, but before they had the time to start packing their gear, something very strange started to unfold. They first noticed two strange blue hazy lights being reflected in the water. Calvin's first thought was that this might be lights from some law enforcers and that they now would get caught for trespassing. This strange activity was accompanied with a strange noise. The sound was described as whirring or whizzing in character. Next to these lights was an oval-shaped metallic object that stretched 30 to 40 feet across and was 8 to 10 feet in height. A very bright beam appears all over them and blinded them for about a second. They found themselves completely paralyzed, but still very conscious. When they regained their vision, they saw three bulky-looking creatures floating towards them in midair. Almost as soon as the opening of the craft appeared, the creatures was almost instantly right there on them. Charles later told that this moment was the most shocking event of his life. They described them as being about 4 to 5 foot tall, having robotic slith mouths and a bullet-shaped head. Their fingers were wielded together and looked like some sorts of crab-like pincers. They were, in Charles' own words, built like football players. They didn't have a neck. The head seemed to be attached directly to their shoulders. Their ears and a nose was pointy looking, almost like cones. The skin was described as grey, ghost-like, pale and wrinkled. The movement of these strange-looking beings was a bit mechanical, almost robotic. Two of them took a hold on Charles, and the other grabs onto Calvin by the arm. The moment they were seized, Charles said that he felt completely relaxed somehow. They took off and levitated them aboard this larger craft and found themselves in some kind of examination room and was floating in mid-air in a 45-degree reclining position. The lights inside the ship was almost blinding. At this point, they were still completely paralyzed, and all they could do was move their eyes. Some kind of machine made an appearance from the ceiling. It was only the size of a deck of cards and had a similarity to an eye. It hovered about 6 inches in front of his face and looked straight into his eyes for a few seconds. It went to the right side of the head, and Charles could hear a sort of click. Then it moved to the back of the head and made the same noise. Then the same thing happened on the right side of the head and the front. This object was obviously conducting some kind of scanning, or perhaps photographing. When this part of the examination was completed, it shot back towards the ceiling. The next thing that happened was a ruffling kind of noise, and a new being made an entrance. This creature did not look the same as the creatures that have escorted them aboard the craft. This being was more feminine looking and did not have the same robotic movements. She had humanoid-looking fingers and proceeded to pinch Charles on the sides of his cheeks. After this, she took one of her fingers and ran it down his throat and tried to get into his nasal cavity. At this point, Charles started to sense pain from this rough procedure, and he started to choke and got really scared. Somehow this creature could read his mind, and she sent him a telepathic message. She said, "Don't be afraid, we are not going to hurt you." Soon after this, they were brought out again and dropped back on the side of the lake, frozen with fear. It is estimated that this whole abduction event lasted somewhere between 15 and 40 minutes in total. Charles reports that his legs were so weak after the procedures that he just fell into the ground and started to crawl towards Calvin, who was weeping and seemed very shocked. They then headed for the car and sat there for about 45 minutes, trying to calm their shattered nerves and decide what to do next. Calvin did not want to let anyone know of what happened. Charles, on the other hand, said that they had to tell somebody. They made the decision to call the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. They knew that this incident was incredibly hard to believe, so they warned the sheriff that he might not believe them, but proceeded to say that they just got picked up by a UFO. The sheriff started to laugh at them, but told them to get down to the station. When arriving, the sheriff was in disbelief about the whole story. He thought that this was some kind of a joke. So because of this, he wanted to conduct a lie detector test. This whole interrogation was secretly recorded on a tape recorder, unbeknownst to Charles and Calvin. It was this secret tape that made this story very credible. It recorded their whole conversation. They were very upset, hysterical, and crying. It was obvious that this was not some kind of a prank. Especially Calvin was very upset and just wanted to get home and get to a doctor and get some pills to handle the nerves. They made the first polygraph test and passed. The examiner was so surprised of the results that they did 3 lie detector tests in total, which they both passed. At the end of the interview, the examiner believed them. Because of this, soon after, ufologists and researchers flew in right away to conduct interviews and hypnotize them to reveal further details. These proceedings concluded that they definitely did experience something traumatic. Both of them insisted that they wanted no publicity. Afterwards, they were sent to an Air Force base just to make sure that they were not radioactive. Most interestingly, there were several other eyewitnesses who saw something strange that day and the following days to come. 3 separate witnesses reported seeing a strange-looking blue light in the sky in the same area as the abduction took place. These witnesses still remain anonymous. When Calvin and Charles was still at the sheriff's office, a former pilot made a call to the station. He stated that he had seen a UFO. There was also a strange radar echo recorded at the time of the abduction. The following day, Charles and Calvin got back to work as usual. They received a call from the sheriff's office while they were still at work, instructing them to report to the station because it was overrun with media. Charles Hickson questioned the sheriff about his pledge to keep the information a secret. The sheriff replied that although he did not disclose the news, someone in his department must have done so without his knowledge. They returned to the station for further interviews, and Charles agreed to undergo the controversial technique of time regression hypnosis by a consultant from the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. However, he was too scared and preoccupied for the process to be successful, and displayed such intolerable fear that they had to end the session. Within the days to come, it was a media circus, to the point that the story reached a global level. After all of this, Calvin spent 45 years in hiding. He felt scared to face the curious, unrelenting public eye. But after suffering a stroke and after 2 open heart surgeries, he finally began being open about his experiences that changed his life. After the incident, Charles gave speeches and interviews, made television appearances, including one for the game show, To Tell the Truth. He has claimed to have had more extraterrestrial sightings in 1974. And in 1983, he wrote the self-published book, UFO Contact at Pascagoula. He said that he felt that the beings that abducted him had no intention to make them suffer, but at the time, he was very afraid that they were going to take them away with them. He later passed away in 2011. In 1993, Calvin founded a company named UFO Investigations to generate television shows about UFOs. Calvin has also, since the incident, attended several UFO conventions. To this day, he believes that there must be an explanation to why it happened to him, but he still ponders why. It felt like the beings had a job to do, and they came, and they did it.